Hey everyone, welcome to NodeRun.com, the online IDE and runtime environment for Node.js, where full stack development is 10 times more productive. In this video, we're going to build a to-do list application absolutely from scratch. Now before I begin, I want to tell you that there are several ways to build applications on NodeRun. You could start by writing raw HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, for example, or you could use rich displays, which is a set of components or widgets that you drag onto the screen using the Visual Designer tool. The other approaches relate to how you treat your server-side code. It could be a stateless application where the browser is controlling the flow, or what we're going to do in this case is we're going to create a stateful application where it's the server that's controlling the flow. All right, so let's get started. I'm going to start by designing the screen, and I'm going to find the grid widget and just going to put that on the screen. And let's adjust it a little bit so we only need 2 columns. Let's resize them, and we're going to have an action column, and we'll have an item column. Now the item column is where our to-do list items will go, and we're going to drag an output field in here, double click it, and give it the name of item. Let's give it a data type of a varying character, and let's give it a max length of 50. So our items is set up. The action column is meant to do things like being able to remove the item. So let's put a button in there. Type remove into it. The grid component is actually a very powerful component that has all kinds of interesting capabilities. So let's add some of those. I'm going to highlight the grid, go to the properties, and let's find sortable columns. We'll set that to true. And let's do something like an export to Excel option. So we'll set that to true as well. So that gives the user some extra capabilities. Next, let's add an ability to add a new item to the list. For that, we're going to add a label here at the top. We'll call this new item, and a text box. Now I'm going to double click the text box, type in new item, and again set this to varying character and a max length of 50. And finally, let's put a button on the screen. We'll call it add. So our screen is pretty much designed. We can maybe make some adjustments here. Now let's give our screen a name. So these names are pretty important here because these are the names that we're going to use in the code to refer to the components on the screen. So we're going to have a to-do screen, that's the name of the screen, and we're going to have a grid, that's the name that we're going to be using to refer to the grid. All right, there's one last thing that we need to do to the user interface before we save, and that is assign some response actions to these buttons. So when the user clicks the add button, we're going to send a response variable or field to the script. We'll call that add, and when they click remove, we're going to send a response of remove. We're now ready to save the screen, so let's go ahead and save it, and this is saved as a JSON file. We'll call this todo.json. Click save. All right, so now comes the exciting part. We're going to write the code to make this application functional. So let's select new JavaScript file. This is going to be our Node.js script. We'll call this to-do, function to-do, and then we'll export this as a runnable function. And let's go ahead and refer to the screen that we just created. So define display. We'll just call the object display, and we'll refer to todo.json. So here's that. What should we do next here? I guess the easy thing to do is just make sure that the screen appears. So let's start out just by doing display.toDoScreen.execute, and I'll go ahead and get that saved. I'll call this todo.js. Go to my file tree, and we're going to make todo.js our application start file. Click OK. Let's publish the application. We'll call this to-do list. And now we're ready to launch it. And all that we're expecting at this point is that the screen comes up. There's no functionality there yet. So let's go back now and put in some functionality. And just to begin with, let's put in some sample list items into the grid. So we'll create a list out here, and let's do something like, actually the list is an array. So this is the proper setup, something like this. And then each item in the array is a record that goes into the grid. So let's do something like go shopping, for example. That'd be one item. And let's do an item, something like write blog post. And let's do an item, something like update homepage. So some sample items to go into the list. And before we show the screen, let's do display.grid replace records. This is the method that's going to get those records into the grid, and we'll pass list to it. So let's go ahead and save and launch the application again. And now we have the list appearing. So this is good. So let's move on to making some of these buttons work. How about adding and removing? So let's go back here. And the one interesting thing that we want to do here is we want to make sure that the screen keeps executing as we go back and have this interaction between the user interface and the server. And I typically do this by creating a while loop. And in this case, I'll just create a while true loop. Now this may seem a little funny because it seems like it's an infinite loop, but the way this works, because this is a stateful type of environment, whenever the execute happens, we're waiting for the user to respond. So if the screen times out at that point, or if the user closes the browser, this will kind of kill the process. So it's okay to have this type of what looks like an infinite loop in here. All right, so we're going to keep displaying the screen, and with every interaction we're going to check for things like if they press the add button. So if they did add, now if you remember, add was the response field that we've assigned, so we can refer to add directly here, and this is how we know that the user clicked add. And if they did that, we'll go ahead and use display.grid.push. That adds one more record to the grid, and we'll pass into it an item, and we'll pass for the value, it'll be new item, which is what the screen field is for that text box. So this should allow us to add items to the list. So let's go ahead and save, go back, refresh, and I'm not very creative here, but let's just put in a new item, and there you can see that it's being added to the end of the list. All right, so let's close out of this and let's work on the remove functionality. Now the remove functionality is a grid level button that is tied to a field that we call remove. So every grid record has this remove property that we can check, and the easiest thing to do is just apply a filter that only keep the records that do not have the remove flag. So it would look something like this: display.grid apply filter, and I'm going to use ES6 syntax here. Basically saying keep all the records that do not have the remove flag. So let's go ahead and save this, and we'll go ahead and launch the application again, and I should be able to now start removing records. So this works perfectly, and let's just test it out. Let's add some other items. Let's say clean up my place, pick up the kids. And let's go ahead and remove some items. So this is working perfectly, and I should be able to also click on the header here to sort the items, and then I should also be able to export the items to Excel. These are all features that we added to the grid as properties. So this seems to be working perfectly, just as expected. So in under 10 minutes we were able to build a functional to-do list application. In my next video I'll show you how to connect this application to an actual database. Thanks for watching, everyone. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you have a NodeRun space that you'd like us to feature, or just an idea for the next NodeRun video that you'd like us to create, simply comment below with your idea or a link to the NodeRun space.